USS Enterprise CV-6, the carrier that wouldn't die. The most decorated ship in United States Navy history. The Japanese thought they had sunk her 3 times. She was so tough that sailors called her the Gray Ghost. This is USS Enterprise CV-6, the aircraft carrier that won the Pacific War. Birth of a legend. When Enterprise launched in 1936, she was one of only 3 fleet carriers in the entire U.S. Navy. At 827 feet long and displacing 25,000 tons, she could carry 90 aircraft. She was state-of-the-art technology, a massive floating airfield representing the cutting edge of naval warfare. But no one, not even her designers, could have imagined the extraordinary role she would play in the coming war, or the legend she would become. Her construction at Newport News Shipbuilding took 3 years. She was powered by steam turbines generating 120,000 horsepower, giving her a top speed of 32 knots. Her flight deck stretched nearly 3 football fields. For her time, she was a marvel of engineering. But she was about to become something more. Something legendary. December 7th, 1941. A fateful absence. December 7th, 1941. A date that would live in infamy. That morning, Enterprise was at sea, returning to Pearl Harbor after delivering Marine Corps fighter aircraft to Wake Island. Her planes were scheduled to land at Pearl Harbor that quiet Sunday morning. Instead, they flew straight into the chaos of the Japanese attack. Some of her pilots engaged enemy aircraft. Others were shot down by confused American anti-aircraft gunners who fired at anything in the sky. Enterprise herself escaped the devastation because weather had delayed her return by 1 day. Just 1 day. Had she been moored in Pearl Harbor that morning, alongside the battleships, the entire course of the Pacific War might have been different. She would likely have been damaged or destroyed. Instead, she survived to become America's instrument of vengeance. When Enterprise finally entered Pearl Harbor and her crew saw the destruction, the burning ships, the oil-covered water, and the bodies, something changed in them. The shock turned to rage. The rage turned to determination. Enterprise would make the enemy pay. The dark months, hitting back. In the desperate months after Pearl Harbor, as America reeled from defeat after defeat, Enterprise was everywhere the Navy needed her. She raided Marcus Island. She struck Wake Island. She hit Rabaul. These strikes did limited physical damage, but they accomplished something more important. They proved America could hit back. They proved the Imperial Japanese Navy was not invincible. They gave Americans hope when hope was in short supply. During these raids, Enterprise refined the tactics that would define carrier warfare. Her pilots practiced coordination between dive bombers, torpedo bombers, and fighters. Her crew learned to launch and recover aircraft faster than anyone thought possible. They were preparing, though they didn't know it yet, for the battle that would change everything. Midway, the turning point. June 4th, 1942. The Battle of Midway. The turning point of the Pacific War. Enterprise was one of 3 American carriers facing 4 Japanese carriers, part of a massive enemy fleet that included battleships, cruisers, and destroyers. The Japanese were coming to finish what they started at Pearl Harbor. They expected an easy victory. They were wrong. That morning, Lieutenant Commander Wade McCluskey led Enterprise dive bombers into the sky. Their mission was simple: find the Japanese carriers and destroy them. But nothing in war is simple. When McCluskey reached the coordinates where the enemy was supposed to be, he found only empty ocean. His pilots were running low on fuel. Most commanders would have turned back. McCluskey didn't. He made a gamble that would change history. He spotted a single Japanese destroyer racing north, leaving a distinctive wake. McCluskey bet that the destroyer was rushing to rejoin the main fleet. He followed it. He was right. What McCluskey's bombers found was beyond their wildest hopes. The Japanese carriers Kaga, Akagi, and Soryu were in the middle of rearming and refueling their aircraft. Their decks were crowded with planes, fuel lines, and bombs. They were helpless, vulnerable, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen. McCluskey's dive bombers rolled into their attacks. In just 5 minutes, Enterprise bombers destroyed the carriers Kaga and Akagi. Bombs penetrated the flight decks and detonated in the hangar bays, touching off fuel and ordnance. Massive explosions tore through both ships. They were transformed from powerful warships into burning coffins. Later that day, Enterprise bombers helped sink the carrier Hiryu. In one day, in one battle, Enterprise had changed the course of the war. Japan would never recover from Midway. The tide had turned, and Enterprise had been the one to turn it. Guadalcanal holding the line. But Midway was only the beginning of Enterprise's war. At Guadalcanal, during the long, brutal campaign for that jungle island, Enterprise was the only American carrier operating in the South Pacific for months. She was all that stood between the Japanese Navy and the Marines fighting ashore. The weight of an entire campaign rested on her deck. On October 26, 1942, at the Battle of Santa Cruz, Enterprise faced her greatest test. 3 Japanese bombs struck her. They penetrated the flight deck and exploded deep in the hangar bay, killing 44 men and starting massive fires. One bomb blew the forward elevator 400 feet into the air. It crashed back down, twisted and useless. The damage should have sunk her. At minimum, it should have forced her to withdraw for months of repairs in a shipyard. Instead, Enterprise's damage control teams performed miracles. They fought fires in smoke-filled compartments. They patched holes in the flight deck with steel plates. They rerouted systems around destroyed sections. Within an hour of being hit, Enterprise was recovering aircraft. Within hours, she was launching strikes against the enemy. The Japanese, seeing the explosions and fires, announced they had sunk her. Tokyo Rose broadcast Enterprise's destruction as fact. The Gray Ghost had been destroyed, Japan told its people. They were celebrating, but Enterprise was still fighting. She limped back to port, was patched up, and returned to combat. When Japanese pilots saw her again, they couldn't believe it. The ship they had sunk was still there, still fighting, still winning. The legend of the Gray Ghost was born. The Philippine Sea. The Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. By June 1944, at the Battle of the Philippine Sea, the war had turned decisively in America's favor. But the Japanese were far from defeated. They launched massive air attacks with hundreds of aircraft. American pilots dubbed it the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot because of what happened next. Over 2 days, American fighters shot down over 600 Japanese aircraft. It was a massacre, a one-sided slaughter that destroyed Japanese naval aviation. Enterprise played a crucial role. Her radar provided early warning of incoming attacks, allowing American fighters to intercept enemy aircraft far from the carriers. Her combat air patrol shot down dozens of Japanese planes. Her pilots added to their already impressive tallies. The Japanese lost more than aircraft. They lost irreplaceable pilots. They lost crews who had trained for years. They lost any hope of winning the war at sea. And Enterprise had been there in the thick of it, doing what she always did, fighting and winning. The kamikaze era. New horrors. As Japan grew more desperate, they turned to a new weapon, the kamikaze. Suicide pilots who crashed their aircraft into American ships. It was terrifying, effective, and impossible to completely stop. Enterprise would face this horror too. On May 14, 1945, with the war nearing its end, a Japanese Zero fighter broke through the defenses. The pilot aimed his aircraft at Enterprise and dove. He crashed through the flight deck into the hangar bay. The explosion killed 14 men instantly. Fires erupted. The forward elevator was destroyed. Again and again, Enterprise's crew saved their ship. They fought fires. They rescued wounded shipmates from burning compartments. They patched holes and restored systems. Enterprise was repaired at sea and back in combat within days. The Gray Ghost refused to die. A record unmatched. When the war ended, Enterprise had earned 20 battle stars, more than any other U.S. warship. She had participated in every major Pacific carrier battle except the Coral Sea when she was racing back from the Doolittle raid. Her aircraft had sunk 71 enemy ships totaling 911,000 tons and shot down 911 aircraft. The numbers were almost identical, a strange coincidence that seemed fitting. She had served in combat longer than any other carrier. She had steamed over 300,000 miles under wartime conditions. She had been attacked more than any other ship and had survived it all. She had launched more strikes, fought more battles, and done more damage to the enemy than any other carrier in the war. Her crew had developed a fierce pride. They knew they served on something special. When other ships were sunk, when other crews were lost, Enterprise kept fighting. The enemy wrote her off multiple times. They announced her destruction. They celebrated her sinking. And every time, she returned to haunt them. The name Gray Ghost fit perfectly. She appeared unexpectedly, struck devastating blows, and vanished before the enemy could respond. She was there at Midway when America needed her most. She was there at Guadalcanal when the Marines were fighting for their lives. She was there at the Philippine Sea when Japan's last carrier force came out to fight. She was always there. A tragic end. After the war, the campaigns began to preserve Enterprise as a museum ship. Veterans lobbied Congress. Letters poured in from across the country. The most decorated ship in Navy history deserved to be preserved. But post-war budget cuts meant no funding. The military was shrinking, money was tight, and Enterprise, worn out from her hard service, was expensive to maintain. In 1958, USS Enterprise CV-6 was sold for scrap. Veterans wept. The carrier that more than any other had won the Pacific War, the ship that had refused to sink, that had fought from Pearl Harbor to the war's end, was cut apart in a scrapyard. It remains one of the great tragedies of naval history that she was not saved. The legacy lives on. But Enterprise's legacy did not die in that scrapyard. It lived on in CVN-65, the world's first nuclear-powered aircraft carrier, which served from 1961 to 2017. It lives on in CVN-80, currently under construction, scheduled to commission in 2028. The name Enterprise will continue to serve the nation. Veterans who served aboard CV-6 said there was something different about her. She had an aura, an intangible quality that made men believe in her. When things looked darkest, when defeat seemed possible, Enterprise was there. She gave them hope. She gave them strength. She gave them victory. At Midway, her dive bombers struck the decisive blow that won the battle. At Guadalcanal, she held the line when no other carrier could. At the Philippine Sea, her fighters helped destroy Japanese naval aviation. She was the constant in the Pacific War, the ship that was always there when needed most. This is USS Enterprise CV-6. Not the biggest carrier of the war, not the newest, not the most heavily armed, just the most successful, the most durable, the most important carrier in American history. The ship that refused to sink, the gray ghost that haunted the Imperial Japanese Navy, the carrier that won the Pacific War. Her story reminds us that wars are won not by the newest or most advanced weapons, but by courage, determination, and the refusal to quit. Enterprise embodied these qualities. She took everything the enemy could throw at her and kept fighting. She was hit, bombed, burned, and written off as sunk. And every time, she came back. The men who served aboard her never forgot. They carried her spirit with them for the rest of their lives. They told their children and grandchildren about the gray ghost, about the carrier that wouldn't die, about Enterprise. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, please give it a thumbs up and share it with naval history fans. Subscribe and hit the bell for more stories of war-winning ships. The gray ghost may be gone, but her legend lives forever. Stay tuned.